Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this video is about gun-free zones. Early this morning, June 12th, 2016, terrorists entered a nightclub in Orlando, Florida, and as of right now, killed 50 and wounded over 50. Now, that number, and this is something that it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. People focus in on the killed, how many people killed. They're calling it the worst shooting in U.S. history, and they're right. But let's not only focus about how many people this person killed, this terrorist killed, let's also think about the 53 wounded. Sometimes we gloss over the word wounded because there's not as a strong mental connection with it as there is killed, because killed is final, finale. 53 people wounded. Their quality of life has been changed irreparably and forever. Some of these people probably will never walk again. Some of them will lose the ability to range of motion. Their lives are forever affected. They're going to have to live with what happened to them, obviously, for the rest of their lives. Now, that's not taking away from the families of those who were killed, loved ones, friends. They also are going to be forever touched by this, as is the U.S., as is the nation. And already, the political wheels are turning in the U.S., and they're talking about gun control, gun control, gun control. I'd like to remind those people that not too long ago there was a very similar attack in Europe, in Paris, where the gun laws are exactly or maybe stronger than what some of these people are advocating for, and they did absolutely nothing to stop terrorists from carrying out a similar attack. Gun control is not the answer. In fact, gun control is the problem. Gun control is definitely the problem and definitely complicit in the cause of this. This club, among with many places in the U.S. and some whole states, are gun-free zones. So this video is about gun-free zones, and this video is about how gun-free zones are complicit in making the average person a target for terrorism rather than protecting them from terrorism and general crime. Some of you are probably nodding your heads along to this already, saying, well, yeah, of course, gun-free zones, gun-free zones. It's rhetoric. Let's avoid the rhetoric and let's talk about what's really happening. I don't want to talk about the gun-free zones and how a good guy with a gun will stop a bad with a guy. I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is the fact that the government, be it the federal government or your state and local government, they have, through regulation, law, whatever you want to call it, created areas where guns aren't allowed. Now, this isn't talking about private businesses that choose to do that. It's talking about government-controlled gun-free zones. Such as bars. Some states, if you have a CCW, you can't carry a firearm into a building that serves alcohol. Some states allow you to carry a gun into a building that serves alcohol as long as they don't make more than 50% of their income from the sale of alcohol. And I don't know how you're supposed to know that. I guess in that case, the law allows you to be specifically vague. And some, the gun-free zone is completely arbitrary. But what it does is it creates a soft target. Terrorists prefer soft targets. The common denominator in all terrorist attacks are usually it's a soft target, not a hardened military target. Focus of terrorism is to further an ideology. And I think that in this particular case, the ideology was definitely furthered. Now, I've already heard some people claim, well, he's not affiliated with any terrorist organization or anything of that nature. Well, right now, Daesh has already, ISIS, as some people know him, have already claimed responsibility, and the shooter called 911 prior to beginning his attack and pledged allegiance to Daesh, or ISIS, however you want to say it. I don't care how you spin it. He is, as far as I'm concerned, a member of a terrorist organization. And you can't show me with any definitive proof that someone has to meet some kind of benchmark in order to be a member of a terrorist organization. You can say, well, he never talked to him. You don't know that. You can say, well, he wasn't part of the organization. How do you prove it? There's no uniform. There's no flag. They don't have a seat on the UN or NATO or SATO or any of these other organizations. So how can you definitively say, like, well, he was just inspired by? It's irrelevant. The motive is irrelevant. Motive is something that we always love to talk about. We love to talk about the why somebody did something. The motive for this attack was ideological. It was terroristic in nature. Does understanding that people hate you, and in this case they may have been attacked because they were gay or lesbian or transgendered or whatever. I think it's a pretty safe bet that that was the reasoning. That was why this guy did it. In fact, it's already been said by some people that he had made comments to the fact that he hated gays. Does that, so that's the motive. Maybe the motive is just that. Does that help us prevent the next attack? No. Will it help us understand and prevent future attacks? No. It's gun-free zone. Why am I hung up on the whole gun-free zone thing? Well, if a government, state, local, federal, whatever, determines that a certain area must arbitrarily be firearm-free, then just me being kind of putting on my critical thinking hat here, I should expect a higher degree of protection from the government in one of those areas, since I have been legally required to not protect myself. Trying to avoid the bravado and the hyperbole and the posturing and the snarkiness between both sides of what is an ideological debate that make for really good memes on Facebook, but don't really they're not really germane to the conversation, and they definitely don't help us get anywhere. We're talking about the government being complicit. They create gun-free zones and provide no additional layer of protection for those gun-free zones. So if you think about it from just a very, again, critical thinking mind point of view, you're making somewhere less safe, and then you're doing nothing to shore up that protection. You're saying this area specifically is less protected. The only people allowed to have firearms in this area is the government. Let that sink in for a second. Think about what I just said. We have a government that says only we can have guns here, which means only the government, and when I say government, I mean all the way down to your local law enforcement, they are the government, can bring firearms lawfully into this area to protect others or themselves. If that doesn't bother you, then I don't really know what to tell you. Would a firearm being present change the outcome? Would a CCW present at the club change the outcome? Yes. I'm going to go ahead and just say definitively yes. And I'm sure some people, especially those who already disagree with my point of view, may be like, well, how could you possibly know that? You can't fucking prove me wrong. You can't. I know my own moral and ethical code, and the moral and ethical code of all the students I have to come through classes and all the responsible gun owners I know. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, they would have taken some sort of action that would have saved lives. Would they have stopped the shooter? I don't know. But the outcome would have been different, and it would have been a little bit to a lot more positive. And you can disagree with me all you want, but one thing you can't do is prove me wrong. And if you think about this critically, remove the emotional disagreement from it and think about facts. Think about the factual situation. In every shooting where there has been a CCW present, the outcome has been, I would say, mild compared to this shooting. Clackamas Mall is a really good example. The Mayan Theater in Texas, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on. The government doesn't consider it a terrorist attack or an active shooting unless we have X amount of bodies. So what happens when there's only one or two or three in these non-gun-free zones where the government says you can have your guns here? The outcomes are usually better. Now, by law in the state of Florida, there couldn't have been a lawfully possessed weapon in that particular environment. But like I already said, had there been one, the outcome would have been different. I don't know how different, but I can say it would have been different. And to those who disagree, I'll say one more time, you can't prove me wrong. The acceptance of the gun-free zones has to stop. Has to stop. Every life we can save by removing gun-free zones, every positive thing we can do as a gun community, not just as a gun community, but as citizens of the United States, as Americans, everything we can do to save lives, every step we can possibly take that will prevent death should be taken. So I look at the government and I ask them, any government official that is watching this, is enforcing gun-free zones doing anything to actually save lives? Or is it creating zones where it's easier for terrorists and the mentally disturbed to kill people. This particular situation, we already know, it's not even 24 hours old yet as of the filming of this video, and we already know this person has been investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. What they do is in their name, yet we don't know why he wasn't arrested or maybe somehow prevented from owning firearms. We don't know. The guns he used, probably legally purchased. But the thing that everybody's going to hang up on is legally purchased. It was easy to get him, instead of the fact that he'd been previously investigated, and where did that investigation go? Maybe the investigation didn't go very far at all because he was a protected class of citizen. He was an immigrant. I think he was born here. His parents immigrated. And he was not white. I don't know. Can't bring race into this because we're not looking at a race, but it bothers me to think about the fact that now we have two ideologies that have officially clashed, a progressive's worst nightmare. So whose side of the argument are they going to come down on? The LGBT community or the Muslim community? Not all Muslims are terrorists. A very, very small fraction of Muslims are terrorists. But to ignore the fact that perversions, if you want to call it that, of their faith create terrorists is the most foolish thing you could possibly think. Again, remove the emotion and think about only the facts. There are common denominators that you cannot ignore regardless of your ideology. This mindset, coupled with the mindset of the government to create gun-free zones in some misguided attempt to make areas safer, have actually made areas less safe. So, as a gun owner, and not only as a gun owner, as a responsible American and as a trainer of other gun owners, it's now my job to make those areas more safe. Because I can't depend on the government to fucking do it for me. I suppose I should apologize for my occasional use of profanity. That's how I talk. And I think the well-placed expletive sometimes goes to underscore the point. I'm pretty passionate about this conversation, and I think those watching, no matter what your political affiliation, should be passionate about it too. Specifically to those in law enforcement. The law is a shield. It's not a sword. It's a shield. Your job as a law enforcement officer, by the oath I know you took, because it's the same oath I took, is to support and defend the Constitution and the people of the United States. By enforcing arbitrary gun-free zones, you are not doing either of those things. In fact, you are complicit as well. I'll just go ahead and say it. If you are acting on behest of the government to disarm law-abiding citizens, what are you doing to actually protect them? Are you protecting them from themselves? I'm a little confused about that. Now, I've been the rank-and-file police officer, so I understand how things roll downhill and how sometimes we don't really think about what we're actually enforcing. But now it's time to actually think critically about what you're being asked to do as a law enforcement officer, be it sheriff's deputy all the way up to ATF agent. Most of the cops I know wouldn't bat an eye about enforcing a law like this. They would look at a guy with a CCW who's in a gun-free zone, maybe a baseball game or something like that, and be like, whatever, I'm glad he's got a gun. But you know as well as I do, there's officers that drink the Kool-Aid. And those are the officers who would hem up a guy like that for doing nothing more than wanting to protect himself and anyone else he chooses to protect. Sometimes we turn a blind eye to officers with that behavior instead of trying to educate them, or at the very least doing something to intervene in their desire to legally wound a person who wasn't harming anyone. If anything, he was adding an additional layer of protection to the particular situation. Carry everywhere. Your state law will vary on the penalty for carrying a firearm into a gun-free zone. It's a personal decision. But concealed means concealed. Are there going to be penalties if you carry a firearm into a gun-free zone and then use that firearm to protect your life and the lives of others? Yes. And again, avoiding bravado and hyperbole and that nonsense. I don't want to use the better judged by 12 than carried by 6 nonsense, because it's so played out that it doesn't even register anymore. We need to find a new way to say that. What I am saying is the stakes. The stakes are really high. So you have to ask yourself, if it's a gun-free zone, I have 2 choices. Just 2. I don't go there, or I carry anyway. there are many, many law-abiding gun owners who are going to gasp or become angry in the comment section about what I just said. But those are actually two really good choices. Carry or don't go there. Pretty simple. Concealed means concealed. We've all heard that before. These so-called non-permissive environments, these gun-free zones, they have to stop. So either we have to push for legislation that removes these special ordinances that declare these arbitrary areas gun-free for whatever misguided intentions, or we just have to ignore the fact that the gun-free zone exists and carry anyway. So in the unlikely but very possible event that someone decides to try to take lives while we're there, we are better equipped to stop it, because I think it's pretty much a guarantee, unless the stars align correctly and properly, that the government is going to be there to protect us in a zone that they deemed us, well, indefensible. I've sworn to defend my country 3 separate times for 3 different professions, and every single time I took that oath very, very seriously. Today, I still take it very, very seriously. I think about that oath every time I train people, the average citizen, to defend themselves. I'm a civilian. Every other law enforcement officer I know is a civilian. We're all civilians. The only people who aren't civilians are the military. Veterans, you're civilians too. Now, the solidarity that we need has to be across the board, from citizen to law enforcement to those in the military. We have to think about, especially those of us who've taken that oath, that the law is a shield. It's designed to protect the average American citizen. It's not designed to be used as a sword against them. If someone is arrested for a crime, that arrest is protecting the victim of that crime. So if there's no victim, who are you actually protecting? Crime's got to have a victim. So victimless crimes aren't necessarily crimes, are they? You cannot enforce a law based on what might happen in most situations. It's just not a thing. You can enforce some laws based on the high likelihood of something happening, but I think it's already very evident that the average, or I should say the vast majority of those who carry concealed weapons or carry firearms for self-defense do so responsibly. Every now and then we hear about somebody doing something stupid. You know why you hear about it? Because it happened. You don't hear about all the cases that did not happen. So this is kind of, I'm really want to underscore my desire for those of you who are also in law enforcement to really think critically about the law you enforce, to really think critically about the oath that you took. And I want you to consider the alternatives, and I want you to consider the penalties for disarming an otherwise lawful and responsible citizen because of some arbitrary law passed by a person you've never met and you don't understand, maybe even understand the mentality behind it. And for those officers that you know who have drunk the Kool-Aid, consider having a little counseling session with them and seeing if you can reach some common ground on their past, present, or future behavior when it comes to interacting with an armed populace. We have an amendment that protects all other amendments. I'm sure you've heard that before. Well, it's time to repeal as much of the legislation as possible that prevents people from protecting themselves in these arbitrary gun-free zones. It's time to light a fire under the ass of the National Rifle Association. It's time to join groups like Gun Owners of America and the Firearms Policy Coalition. It's time for all these respective nonprofit lobbying groups that are on our side as far as Second Amendment rights to come together under a solidified voice and make gun-free zones illegal. To not allow the government to arbitrarily disarm the populace based on some vague notion of what may occur, and instead allow the populace to protect themselves responsibly and lawfully in the event of a terrorist attack or someone mentally disturbed who just decides he wants to kill people. I will use one old adage, one tired phrase. An armed society is indeed a polite society. Those people who have been from the progressive or the liberal side of the argument, who've come over and gotten firsthand experience with firearms owners, they usually change their minds because by and whole we are a very responsible, very respectful, very polite group of people. there are fools among us, just like any organization, just like any ideology. But by and large, we need to take back our responsibility from the government. And we need to let them know that the government is representative of us. Our desire now is that we should be able to protect ourselves wherever we go, no matter the circumstances. I'm Aaron Cowan with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.